thanks very much for having me here today. It's a real honour, and I'm delighted that this event's taking place and for it to be happening in person. Whilst we're here in the tech industry, I've definitely had enough of just dealing with virtual conferences. And I'm very pleased that BAE Systems is here as well. So just a little plug for the stand. My colleagues are just over there. So if you've not been to see us already today, do pop over and come and see us. I think events like this are super important. The tech industry in the UK has been really lacking in diversity throughout my entire career. And when I started out, which was nearly 30 years ago now, which is kind of terrifying to think about, we didn't even talk about diversity in tech. It wasn't seen as a problem. And for the last kind of 10 to 15 years, there's been an increasing recognition of the gap, but not enough action taken to address this. And for me, there are some areas where that are a bit of a burning platform. I'm going to get onto those later. But now it feels like we're making some long overdue progress. I'm going to talk to you today about what I think are important leadership traits for the age of digital and artificial intelligence being ubiquitous. And I'm going to give you a bit of a background about myself to really kind of bring to life how I formed these opinions and before I get into the changing demands of the tech industry and why leadership is kind of more important than ever. So who am I? I'm Digital Transformation Director at BAE Systems, and I've had quite a few different jobs in tech. I feel like I've done most of the different jobs over the years. I started out as an analyst programmer. Most of the last 10 to 15 years or so, I've been an enterprise architect, mainly in consulting roles across different government departments, including setting up enterprise architecture functions. Now I'm a little bit vain, so I don't want to kind of be too precise about how exactly long I've been an IT professional for. And every time I talk about my career, I find an alarming amount of time has passed since the last time I talked about it. But I graduated in computer science and maths sometime in the mid-90s. And even before I'd finished university, I had a few paid gigs as a coder during those long vacations, and then started in earnest after my final exams. And over the years, I've moved through being a developer to lead developer into system design and architecture, and then enterprise architecture. And what I do now is more in the tech strategy space. And it's been a long time since I've written any code. Somebody was asking me about that earlier this morning, and I genuinely miss that tangible feeling that you get when you make progress when you're writing code. And now I think I do what I would only call sort of technical swanning around, which sounds quite fun, but it's also intangible. And talking at events like this, having soapbox moments about what I think is really important in tech right now. And the kind of things that I've built have ranged from everything from kind of like really detailed real-time systems like air traffic control, where you've got to be super precise, to enterprise scale things that span multiple government departments and have budgets of like 2 billion plus. One of the reasons why I talk about digital transformation and leadership is that there are lots of lessons that I've learned the hard way. And there's got to be an easier way of being successful with technology. So I've given that a lot of thought over the years. Now I'm more used to presenting on agile and digital transformation into the Ministry of Defence, where everybody knows who BAE Systems is. But I guess a lot of people here today won't be familiar with us. We're more commonly known as being a major prime in the defence sector. Perhaps famous for things like aircraft carriers and fighter jets. But my bit of BAE is a little bit different. So by contrast to my lengthy career, digital intelligence, so we were represented over there, was formed only in February this year from pulling together the data and digital parts of BAE Systems. We've got about 5,000 people covering 16 countries and work mainly in government, including international government, not just the Ministry of Defence. And I like to think of us being instrumental to the digital thread that is the security and prosperity of the UK. That's why I've been with the company for a long time. It's that kind of mission focus. In addition to supporting Defence and their friends on digital transformation, I also happen to be the founder and chair of our Gender Balance Network, and I'm a big advocate for careers in technology, particularly software engineering. Now, I do take a lot of professional pride in what I do, And as I said, I often feel very frustrated when these big transformation programs that have enormous budgets don't deliver on their promises. And all too often the technology gets blamed. Now maybe as a technologist I tend to get defensive about tech, but I've drawn the conclusion that technical problems are always solvable if you've got access to the right talent, the right resources and the right budgets. But perhaps the wrong questions were asked of technology in the first place, or the programme has kind of lost sight of what it was originally set out to do, and programmes often become about these arbitrary delivery milestones, rather than actually remembering that technology is there as a thing to leverage to solve business problems. So I've accidentally become a bit of an evangelist, if you like, for doing digital transformation properly, including dealing with some common bear traps. And I'm interested to note that digital transformation is a term we hear a lot these days, but it's quite woolly and people don't really know what it means. So I'm going to explain what I mean by it. Kind of just as sort of part of the background is the pace of change in technology. One of the things that makes me super passionate about tech is that it never stands still. Now my smartwatch, which I'm not wearing today because I found when I speak at conferences it often interrupts me, has more processing power and storage than an entire data modelling facility I worked on at the start of my career. And that facility was probably about the size of the seating area that we've got here. And that was for doing really complicated mathematical models for synthetic environments and digital twins. And I think that's really awesome that all of that processing power fits into something the size that's kind of probably about twice the size of the watch I've got on just now. And that pace of change is just getting faster and faster. And I think that's why digital transformation is so ubiquitous now. Now, if you Google the definition of it, lots of organisations reference it in a way that I think is unhelpful. They talk about keeping up with the competition or customer demands or keeping pace with technical change. And I think that's quite passive, waiting for change to come along and trying to catch up with it. And actually as technologists we have to be a bit more predictive. We have to have our crystal balls out and anticipating what's coming and planning some options and maybe getting ready for what we can. And we know that these kind of catastrophic changes are going to become more common, like we've seen with the pandemic in recent years. Now, digital transformation in my sector, so mainly working in government, has often become synonymous with particular technologies. So in government they often talk about digital transformation and migration to cloud and kind of muddle those things up together, or maybe doing machine learning and artificial intelligence. And those technical deliveries again lose sight of the original business problems. So maybe cloud implementation will take place in a government department and then somebody will declare, tick, we've done digital transformation. And actually that's just really about getting started, it's an enabler. Cloud, artificial intelligence and machine learning are the tools of today, but actually I think edge computing is really powerful, coming back to that smartwatch analogy, and it's something that is particularly important in the defence sector if you think about the amount of technology that's deployed out in the military fields. And quantum computing is not that far away, it's not just limited to sci-fi. So if we think about digital transformation, we need to not attach it too much to any particular technology because that's going to pass us by. So the main message that I want to emphasise about digital transformation is it's never really done and it's a state of constant change. The digital age really demands business agility, and that agile word often gets stuck just with software development. And again, I was talking to somebody on our stand about this today, that it's actually really easy to move software teams to working in a more agile way. But that's not the same as having your wider business agility. So I find it easiest to describe a digitally transformed organisation as having a set of characteristics. It's willing to transform both with continuous improvement, maybe Kaizen we'd call it, and through revolution. It embraces innovation, and innovation needs to be like a culture across the whole organisation, not just in pockets. Lots of organisations have innovation teams. And we need to think about the difference between invention, so creating something new, and innovation, which is taking that new technology or new-ish technology and applying it to a completely new problem. and have the healthy obsession with improving the customer experience. Now, customers can be in the traditional sense, they could be external to your organisation, but they also could be internal to your organisation. So in my world, those customers could be soldiers or they could be police officers who are the operators of the systems that we're developing. Digitally transformed organisations are data-driven, so recognise the power in data, and the speaker on before me was talking quite a lot about evidence-based decision-making. So being able to use automation where appropriate and only ask for data that's actually being used for decision-making. What I find, particularly with big companies, is they end up with this cottage industry of management information. All too often, senior people demand data to kind of give this illusion of evidence-based decision-making, when in reality the decision's already been made by instinct, and then they're searching around for data points to try and back up a conclusion that they've already drawn, to make it look much more scientific than it is, which I think damages an organisation's productivity because it sucks up a lot of resource to collect all of that data, and what's the point if it's not being used? It's absolutely fine to be instinctive, and when you're being agile, you often have to be intuitive, but I think we need to be honest about it and not pretend that it's a scientific process. Now, being value stream driven, what I've noticed over the last few years is lots of organisations are trying to declare themselves to be technology organisations when that's not why they're created in the first place. And I find this is getting quite confused with those organisations' identities. And again, I see it a lot with government departments where they're now declaring themselves to be technology organisations when actually we want them to be serving the public in the way that they're set up to do in the first place. So understanding that value and how different bits of the organisation contribute to the value is key to digital transformation. Now, redefining the work employee proposition. This has been around for quite a while, but it's become very acute with the pandemic. And I don't know how the rest of you feel. I'd be happy to have a chat about it after this. But hybrid working, I don't think is right at all. We kind of all suddenly switched to remote working at the start of the pandemic. And what I've noticed with my own experience is my emails have exploded. I get gazillions more than I used to. I spend my days in back-to-back virtual meetings. I spend more time in meetings than I did pre-pandemic, and I don't think that suddenly there's more demand on my time. I think there's something happening with productivity there. And there are some people who are real advocates for being back in the office 5 days a week. Now, I think the human connection is really important, kind of as evidenced by us being here today. And there are some government ministers, I'm sure you know who they are, I'm not going to name and shame them, up here on the stage, but I think they really shows a lack of understanding for creativity and innovation. I know I do my best thinking when I'm not staring at a computer screen, even though, again, I'm a technologist. So getting that balance right is something that I don't think industry's got the answer for yet. And I also think there's something really important about being inclusive and recognising that each individual is going to have different needs as to what that kind of balance of working from home and working in the office is going to look like for them. Now, security savvy, a digitally transformed organisation absolutely has to have information security at the core of what it does. I'm not going to labour on that because I would like it to just be seen as a hygiene factor and a given, not kind of an afterthought, which I see all too often today. And this is where the tech comes in. It's absolutely essential to have the infrastructure to accelerate digital strategy, and this is where cloud comes. It enables us to develop capability much faster, exploits technologies as tools to run the organisation. The organisation is not run by those tools. We can't be dictated to by technology like that. And making the investment choices in line with understanding those value streams and knowing when to redirect that investment. All too often with technology, people get on a hobby horse. And I've heard some organisations who may be obsessed over blockchain, for example. There's nothing wrong with blockchain, but they kind of get a bee in their bonnet, and they absolutely have to keep finding the problem that blockchain will solve, which distracts them from actually being a productive business. And of course, it's fast and agile. That's why we're doing digital transformation in the first place. Key to all of that is actually the human element, having an empowered workforce, rather than the command control hierarchy that we see in traditional organisations. So digital transformation, which might sound weird to talk about at a tech event, is really a cultural thing, and it's a mindset which is underpinned by exploiting technology and is data-driven, so and actually understands evidence-based decision-making and knows when it needs to be intuitive. I think our enterprise architecture is key to all of this. The orchestration of business value and technology and knowing that technology only delivers on its benefits when it goes hand in hand with organisational change. Just delivering tech on its own at best can be an enabler. And just want to talk about enterprise architecture a little bit, because I do think it's really useful, but it's sort of lost its way. So I've always had the sense that enterprise architecture is pivotal to bringing together technology and information, people and business value, but it just struggles. And so where does it go wrong? I think there's kind of a habit of getting lost in this delightful intellectual activity of trying to model the universe, worrying about meta models, and not speaking the same language as others. And I know, because I've fallen into a lot of those traps myself, and it gets in the way of the effectiveness of enterprise architecture. And it can often get very abstract, this sort of like lofty level of strategy, which creates tensions with operational drivers. And it's become much more acute with the uptake of Agile. I've worked with some government departments where at times it's looked like the actual enterprise architecture function and the CTO roles were under threat. Because when you're working in an Agile way, maybe one could question why you need to have that. What I found is that actually the opposite's true. With architecture and dev moving at such an increasing pace, it's more important than ever to be able to have the strategic direction to work within, kind of a framework, and have these guardrails to drive daily decisions, so the dev teams are confident that they're not kind of introducing more chaos into organisations. And so having a very high level target state. But it needs to be quite abstract so you don't get locked into particular technology houses. Like when I first started my career, every organisation would declare what type of technology house it was. And I kind of, there's nothing wrong with these technologies, but you'd go somewhere and they'd say that they were a Microsoft house, for example, or they were an Oracle house. And I think those days are gone. We need to have much more a hybrid set of technologies now, and not kind of hang our hat on any particular technology, because that gets in the way of agility. And when I talk about Agile, what I really refer to are the original kind of principles of Agile, so that you're rolling across an entire enterprise, not just for software. I've seen too many organisations decide that they're going to flip a switch and think if they get Agile, that's going to fix all of their business problems, and not really understand the top-to-tail cultural changes that are needed to be properly Agile. It's actually really easy to move software teams to being Agile. I think most developers want to work in that way. It's kind of instinctive to us. But it won't really help with the organisation agility unless you uproot the entire system of process and habits. And I mean the entire system across the enterprise. Even when there's lots of investment in training, this doesn't alter the day-to-day habits that we all have. This kind of, I call it the risk and reward system that we've all worked to throughout our whole careers. The things that have motivated us, the things that have kind of got us into trouble when we haven't followed them. That's quite the opposite to being Agile. I've worked with lots of people who really clever people who've done a great job of talking the talk, but revert to type when it comes to action. It's not being critical of them as individuals. Like any psychologist will tell you how hard it is to change habits. And that's why Agile leadership is so important. And I do really want to emphasise some of that leadership stuff, because we've all got a responsibility there. So what kind of things need to be Agile if it's not about the software? Enterprise architecture, of course, I would say that. Systems engineering, governance, technology strategy, and everything CTO related. So being willing to share all of those strategies when they're work in progress, and kind of being transparent about them. Portfolio planning, I don't know how widely that term's used outside of government, but kind of how you actually plan the portfolio of work that you're going to do and the investment case behind it, particularly around the finances and how those investments get made, and being willing to invest in something that has a lot of unknowns. I find that there's this tendency to want to have all the answers before getting started on something. And particularly commercials, that can be quite a challenge. How do you go to contract for something that's not yet defined? And being willing to get started and scoping and mapping out the future and dealing with uncertainty. Agile is all about dealing with uncertainty and kind of recognising progress as we're going along. So it's very experimental. And leadership behaviours around empowerment, being genuine about that fail fast thing. I hear lots of organisations almost like shy away from it. There's this kind of icky reaction to failing fast, and I think we need to be much more supportive about that without having a blame culture. Failing fast is actually, again, very scientific and experimental, and we learn from those experiments, so we shouldn't shy away from it. So all parts of an enterprise need to work in sympathetic cadence with a really simple to understand vision to empower people with their day-to-day decision making. And I'm not bothered about software which agile methodology people use. I've come across people who quite enjoy having an argument as to whether you're safe or whether you're Scrum. I'm not bothered, providing you stick with the core principles of it. And actually, I say it's a little bit like yoga. If you're doing yoga, you get benefits out of it if you've got a great instructor. If you think about the physical as well as the spiritual. So it doesn't matter if it's red hot or vinyasa, and I think go into agile in the same kind of mindset. It's all about how well you've understood the original principles. Now, I get on my soapbox about this quite a lot, and I've become more aware of it since I've been working with the military over the last few years. I think leadership is a trait that's really undervalued in the tech industry. We invest a lot in our technical skills, and I'm saying that as a technologist. And then we suddenly reach a point in our careers where we're having to be people leaders, and those skills haven't been nurtured in us. I don't think it's an innate ability. I don't like pigeonholing people in that way, but it can be a shock to the system, and things can go really badly wrong. And it is very different to being a leader of, say, a team of developers compared to being an organisational leader, and things can come unstuck. And what I've noticed with working with the military is they really nurture that leadership first. And so you have people who are not experts in their fields, but they're excellent leaders, and I think we can learn a lot from that. And I'd like to see much more investment in leadership capability and some of those soft skills in the tech industry. And this fast-moving, ever-changing world that we're in now, I think is actually quite exhausting. I've read a lot in the last few weeks about anxiety, and it's on the rise, and I don't want to create this sort of a doom and gloom culture here today, but we've had so many things in the UK over the last few years. We've had the pandemic, it doesn't matter how you feel about it, but like Brexit, there's a lot of uncertainty around that. We've got the economic situation. We've had a change in the head of the royal family. All of these things just seem to have come at us quite fast over the last few years. And I think after a period of relative stability that we've lived in throughout most of my adulthood to date, and just as a reminder, I'm quite old, I've lived through quite a lot of stable period. And there's nothing we can do about that within our organisations, really. We can't change the external world, but what we can do is make sure our workplace is the right environment for people to feel psychologically safe and to be their best. And that's what helps people be productive and to be innovative and so on. And the world of agile can at first appear to be one where leadership's less needed, and I think sometimes experience is less respected in the world of agile, and I think there's a place for everything. Leaders absolutely need to be clear on strategy and be inspiring to get that buy-in, be leaders of hearts and minds. I realise I sound like a hippie when I say those kind of things, but I've sort of become such an advocate for good leadership in the tech industry. And I think people will then feel empowered to make daily conscious decisions that collectively nudge towards the organisation in the right direction. And without the right leadership, I actually think it's impossible for an organisation to achieve digital transformation. And the wrong behaviours will be blockers that will result in what I would call the digital understanders. I don't think that's a real word, but the digital understanders seeking their careers elsewhere. And so there are 4 key pillars that I see to being an agile leader. One is being able to set direction and purpose to enable prioritisation and those investment choices to be made, being connected with the customers, creating a clarity of role so that everyone knows what's expected of them and what to expect of each other, and keeping that really simple, being authentic. So trust building is absolutely key to an agile culture, being open and transparent, and role modelling values to guide behaviour. Devolved decision-making, empowering people to act, but taking accountability for those outcomes. Now, this is something that leaders really struggle with. I think particularly when we've come through a technical career path, it's really difficult to let go of the detail. But devolved decision-making has to be absolutely that. Just because somebody's done something a different way to the way you would have done it doesn't make it bad. And making the best use of expertise, whatever the seniority, the background, the skills, the educational level, etc. And collaborative achievement. So really supporting teamwork and busting across silos, moving away from this this individual hero culture that I think does exist quite a lot in the tech industry, the individual who'll work all night to fix a problem, and knowledge sharing and being open to influence from others. And finally, on the leadership thing, I think there's this kind of what I would call the leadership paradox, being both an enabler and a disruptor. Now, an enabler, I think in the tech startup culture, we don't talk about this set of traits often enough. That's all about the clear direction and purpose, creating a safe place and being trusted and trusting, and coaching for improvement, devolving the decision-making and collaborative. The disruptor. So Elon Musk is probably a really good example of this. I find him a problematic leader for many reasons, but that's like a whole other talk. But the disruptor looks out, is close to the customers, ruthlessly prioritises and challenges the status quo, and is bold and determined. And as individuals, we probably fall into have a tendency for one or the other, but we need to be both those things to be leaders in the age of agiles. It's worth having a bit of a moment to reflect on kind of what we fall into and how we can adjust our behaviours to kind of be both of those things. Very traditional, risk-adverse, hierarchical organisations just don't nurture those leadership traits. Some organisations may actively discourage them, some or many of those behaviours, and without them, I actually would declare digital transformation to be impossible. No matter the budget thrown at the technology, and it's just going to be super frustrating. Now, I'm sure you've heard quite a lot of tech talks today, but there's one area that I really want to touch on as kind of, I suppose, something that genuinely leaves me awake at night, and that's artificial intelligence. Now, a lot of people have this view, lots of organisations, that artificial intelligence is here to save us, and it's got a lot of potential. One problem with artificial intelligence is you can't chuck it at rubbish data. We're going to end up with very poor decision making if we do that, so we need to understand our data maturity, and that's what I spend a lot of my time doing, speaking with government departments, going, artificial intelligence is great. First of all, I'm going to be a computer science pedant and say it's not always artificial intelligence, but let's not worry about that too much. But the quality of data has to be known. But the other thing is just the bias. So, as I said at the beginning, I've always been disappointed by the lack of change in diversity in tech in the UK. And I'm not kind of saying that just because of this event. I always say it when I give a technical talk, because I think it's really important to normalise the importance of diversity. If you only talk about it on panels about diversity, then it becomes a bit of an afterthought and a bit sidelined. So I normalise it. So if I'm speaking at any tech leader conference, I kind of insist on saying something about diversity. Because it's everybody's responsibility to address. But artificial intelligence for me is the burning platform on this. Now, I only naively thought that it would be a generational thing, that we'd just get more diversity as I got older. I did computer science and maths at university, as I said. I had a shock on my first day at university when I was the only girl there. I did my A-levels in an all-girls school, and I knew it wouldn't be 50-50, but really I was quite taken aback by the lack of diversity on my undergraduate course. And that needle's just not moved quickly enough. And so let me explain why I'm in a panic about artificial intelligence. Right now, people are creating algorithms, human beings are creating algorithms. And there's been some kind of press stories, which I think is good to shine a spotlight on the challenges around where AI's gone bad and where it's really highlighted biases. Now, the problem here, this is my opinion, is that the people creating the algorithms that drive automation are almost an entirely homogenous community. And so they build biases into the machines and don't notice it. We don't notice when we're surrounded by people who are the same as us, but we notice when we're different. So throughout my career, it's not unusual for me to be being the only woman in the room when I'm there with other technical people, and I feel that acutely, right? I feel super self-conscious around it. But when I'm not in the room, people won't look around in the room and go, oh, it's no offence to anybody called Andy, but I kind of Andy is my kind of illustrative, stereotypical white tech guy, that there's a room full of Andys, and they won't notice because it feels quite comfortable. And the problem is that soon enough, machines will be training machines. So if we don't fix those biases now, if we don't fix the data sets that train on them, it's going to be too late, it's going to be too difficult to do it. And I think AI actually has the opportunity to be better than us humans. We can train the machines to be less biased than us. We have to tell them to do that. Computers do currently obey what we tell them to do. And they look at the data that we feed them. And if you just go and Google any job title, the kind of the sexist and racist stereotypes that take place in the imagery, despite some headlines around that, if those are the data sets that we're training these algorithms on, that's just going to continue, perpetuate, and actually amplify it. So, I hope it makes a difference. When I go and speak to government departments about artificial intelligence, this is one of the things that I always drop in there, about sharing my anxiety, genuine anxiety, about addressing artificial intelligence as being kind of the burning platform for where we need to kind of fix the diversity issue first. As leaders, we can't leave this to being somebody else's problem. It's not the burden of anybody from any underrepresented group to fix, and it doesn't sit with HR or recruitment, and it's not the fault of the pipeline. It's our job in the industry to fix it and not kind of have it as an AOB agenda item. So just in summary then, digital transformation, it's never really done, and it's a way of being. It's a set of characteristics that an organisation has, rather than a set of technologies that you apply in order to be a digitally transformed organisation. Agile isn't just something that lives in software teams. It needs to be an ethos or a philosophy. And the right kind of leadership is absolutely key to success in all of this. And it goes without saying, it should go without saying, that good leadership is inclusive leadership. So thanks very much. That's all. I can kind of probably tell. I have a few soapbox moments about some of those things if you want me to go further. But I'm happy to kind of answer questions, because I realise I've covered quite a lot of broad things in kind of one talk on digital transformation. So weirdly, I'm going to have to put my glasses on to hear you. Have you got the mic?
Hi, that was a really great. I mean, the soapbox was there, but I think we were all really loving it. You mentioned earlier, I really like what you had to say about good leadership. I mean, I think for all of us going into tech, we really see these really big leaders of really massive tech companies, and I think everyone has their favorites and maybe least favorites.
I have a list.
Yeah, me too. I was wondering, you mentioned, Elon Musk as maybe a disruptor, and I definitely personally would agree with that. But I want to hear more maybe about an example of potentially maybe good leadership that you see, someone who's really spearheading maybe a bigger tech company, but is really setting out these examples of good leadership traits and collaborating and really making it a system-wide core principle rather than just something that's just for recruitment or D&I. Would love to hear about it.
So I think, one of the tech giants, Microsoft, has really transformed itself in recent years, and that's down to the leadership of that organisation. It's such a big organisation that it takes a long time for all of that to come through, but they've really changed the nature of their business. So I think there's more to do there, but I think in terms of the scale of the organisation, I think that's quite pivotal, and that's all down to the guy who's gone at the top there. He's written a book about it and everything. So I think that just kind of shows what one personality can do to kind of to turn an organisation around at that time, like that. And like I say, I work a lot with the military, and I'd really admire their people leadership style. And they talk about servant leadership. Now they're not technology leaders as such, but it's that kind of empathetic leadership is something that I think I've learnt a lot from, not just the kind of the technical aspects.
Great, thank you.
I think I've got 5 minutes left, so we've got time for a couple more questions.
What would you say is the ideal way to develop those leadership skills in the business? So for any one person, what would you say are the key things they need to do to attain those skills and for the business to help them achieve that?
I think that's a really great question, and I think I reflect on these things because I think I learned them the hard way, and I probably learned them a little bit too late. I kind of, had some experiences where I got frustrated because my technical ideas, I thought, maybe I'm overconfident on my technical ability, but my technical ideas weren't really getting the traction with non-technical people at the pace I would have liked, and it felt quite frustrating. So I did a lot of reflection. I was probably kind of 10 plus years into my career, and I was like, why is this feeling so difficult? So key to all of this is to have some self-awareness. and to value those soft skills just as much as we value the hard skills. So, for kind of early part of my career, like many technologists, I was kind of all about which languages do I know, which architecture models do I understand, which frameworks, what's my software engineering methodology. So I was almost exclusively focused on my technical portfolio of skills, and I hadn't concentrated enough on particularly on the communication side of things and how to communicate with non-technical people. And if you want to get buy-in for your ideas, you need to be able to do that. Nowadays I work really closely with our marketing team, and I work with colleagues who have journalist backgrounds. So I've learned a lot from them. And I think recognizing that there's a whole load of skills which are valuable in the tech industry. I think this feels like a kind of a group therapy session in a way when I kind of start confessing some of these things. But I think as technologists, we can sometimes be a bit arrogant, and we kind of value our technical skills, and we kind of think we see ourselves as being clever, and maybe don't listen to people who aren't like us in quite the same way. But actually, just because somebody's speaking a different language doesn't mean what they have to say isn't valuable. And I think that's absolutely key. And I kind of, again, feel like I'm in a confessional. I wish I'd learned some of those things sooner than I did, because I had some really hard times and some really frustrating moments because of it. Because I just had this set of values. Like, if I'm a great coder, that's kind of all that matters, and it's not all that matters. Any other oversharing you'd like me to do? Yeah.
I think we've got room for one last question. It's almost 2:10, so. And then we'll get into the JP Morgan up next.
Hi, that was a very good presentation, and thank you for talking about leadership. I want to latch on your experience as someone who has worked with the government and who is a leader in your own right, and who is also a specialist in AI. Bringing all those three together, what do you think will be the role of government collaboration in AI? Because the future is AI, and one thing I understand about tech is if it's been done before, why invent the wheel? So I think if AI is going to get to where we want it to go, governments need to come together with their intelligence. And somehow, I don't know if it's my personal opinion, governments seem to hide themselves away from about intelligence. They seem to not share intelligence with each other. And AI, to get to where we want it to be, we are going to be needing that. So your company, you as a leader who has been working with government, what do you think you can do to encourage these guys on collaborating? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I think that's a really interesting question. And actually, I've noticed that things have changed a lot over the last few years, just with different UK government departments and their willingness to share stuff, and not kind of, they used to kind of think that their problems were unique, that everyone's special, their problems are unique, and everything's got to be created just for them, which means, as you say, a lot of reinvention takes place, and it's not very cost effective. Instead of, it's much better to take what someone else has done and kind of elaborate it for your own needs. So on the subject of artificial intelligence, there's actually been quite a few quite high-profile strategies published over the last couple of years by different government departments in the UK. I think it was only in May, maybe June, the Defence AI strategy was published. And what's interesting to note about that is there's also a whole load of ethics around it, so ethical use of AI. And there's a lot of focus on that, which I'm sure is a relief to all of us to kind of understand that there's people aren't just like blindly going into using AI, and they are very much looking to industry, to the commercial sector, rather than kind of reinventing the wheel for everything themselves. So it's a step in the right direction. I've got to wrap up now, but yeah. So it's changed a lot, that collaboration.